Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Season 1, Episode 7 of The Company You Keep. Great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So, Daphne and Charlie's working relationship. It's an interesting dynamic in this episode where we see kind of like the shifting tides between Charlie's relationships with the two complicated women and circumstances in his life. Obviously, the woman he's really in love with, Emma, obviously keeping her distance and trying to be as cold as possible because it's like, right, I do love you and you're just not the person I thought you were. Even to the point Charlie's like, a week ago you told me you love me. She's like, a week ago you were a bartender. He's like, I still am a bartender. But for Emma, it's not being able to separate, like, right, not only are you a criminal, you also lied to me, but it's like, it's not really something you lead with a, hey, I'm a grifter, but it's also like, yeah, it's something he agonized over, and maybe eventually Emma will find out, like, how much he agonized over wanting to tell her the truth, like, because she obviously has, like, a very, like, callousness with even with, like, his, I don't even want to use something as, like, harsh as a word as callous, but once again, it's just, like, that distant, I mean, the sad thing is, she kind of, like, tore down a lot of her walls when it came to Charlie, and now she's kind of building them back up because of that, and the fact is, she was like, oh, it's nice seeing you, and walked past his family, didn't say anything, so, but like I said, on the other side of it, he's got a relationship with, Daphne that he's trying to, like, so, like, he wasn't trying to play her, he was just like, right, I'm trying to do this job, get as close to you just for the sake of the job, but, like, Emma wanted him to get even closer, so, and especially with her later on comms, that's a whole complicated thing, but either way, his family feels a certain way about it. Birdie is more so okay with him being, because it's like, right, his love life is actually going to, like, benefit us in the long run, because we are getting CIA protection, we're seeing his assets, so it all works out in the end. Because I think it eventually, because this was just a Charlie and Emma operation, eventually there's going to be a Charlie and the entire family operation with Emma, so I think that's going to be really interesting, and maybe that's when Emma will start getting even more perspective on the family, because she hasn't really gotten, obviously she spent time with them, and obviously spent time alone with, like, Birdie amongst the, alone amongst the family, but it's like, I think in future operation is when she's really going to get, like, a full scale, a full scope and understanding of the family and Charlie, because she also doesn't know about the last relationship he was in, the whole Tina situation, so. And I think, once again, I do believe that's going to come into the fray in some shape or form. And with him working so close, with Charlie working so close with Daphne now, I get the feeling like that might be where those circles eventually cross. But we'll talk. We'll see if that ends up being the case. But we'll talk about more about that if it ever kind of really, potentially, like, that situation never kind of rears its head. But anyway, Daphne wants to return the painting to the Brad guy that they stole and left a fake with last episode, because she wants to get in business with him, because, obviously he's the arms salesman, and she wants to kind of handle it a more legitimate way. It's just like, I don't want him to see me as just another criminal. I want him to see me as a businesswoman and wants to, like, sell me the guns and stuff. So obviously Emma gives Charlie a cover that will allow him to go to this place, is basically where a lot of self-defense contracts and stuff like that, and, like, there's some pretty high-ranking, like, officials there, like CIA people. That's why Charlie has to play the role of an ex-CIA person, which I think is so interesting, because I think the title of this episode is called The Company Man, which just layers to that, because it's like, hey, you're pretending to be a company man, in this room of kind of company men or just, like, high-ranking official people, but it's also like, yes, here you are working for the company, the CIA, so it's layers upon layers in that regard, and also the fact is he has to kind of lean into it even more so of, like, right, I'm the asset, this is the operation, it's not even about, my complicated feelings, because Charlie's definitely wearing his heart on his sleeve a lot more than, I mean, Emma's obviously, like, wearing her arms on her heart on her sleeve is a lot more obvious to us than I think it is to Charlie, because I think she's so, once again, she's good at, like, hiding them. I mean, it's part of the job, but I think it's also, part of her own, like, nature. I think she hides it well, and I think Charlie makes it a lot more obvious with himself. Like, he's too much of a romantic, and I think Emma can be too, but I think she balances that out by being able to kind of, like, push it down. Because there's moments throughout this episode where she tries to like make it seem like, no, it's not because of you, Charlie. It's just like later on when she ends up helping. I'm jumping around a little bit, but he was like, "Whoa, did you do that to save the operation or me?" And she's like, "The operation," because she can't admit that. Yes, we know that protecting Charlie also came at it too, but it's also like, well, there is a bit of like, well, he is under her protection, so regardless of how complicated her feelings are about him, he is still an asset, and the fact of the matter is if something happens to him, it will be on her. So, but it's like, she doesn't have that, like, no, like, feelings at all. Like, if it was a normal asset thing, I think she still would care. What makes it even more complicated is because it is someone she did love, and there's still some residuals of that. And it's once again coming to term with who she always thought she was, always seeing things so black and white, Charlie being this complicated, like, gray spot, you know, that kind of has changed a lot. So like I said, I think any other asset she would be in that situation, unless they were a terrible human being. But the problem is she sees Charlie, but she also tries to like justify in her head, like, right, he's just a charming con man that he is. Even later on making a comment like, oh, you're very good at getting women to trust you. And you can tell Charlie's like, okay, you know, like he just like, all right, just kind of have to brush my shoulders off with that situation. I just got to take that on the chin, you know? So, but either way, it was kind of interesting seeing them kind of operate together, like, because obviously they've always kind of been like on the same side, but only because seeing Daphne and Charlie work together because she has always been the antagonist, and now it's like, right, I have to kind of play you just to kind of like look after my family. Which is actually interesting because obviously their conversations end up floating about family, but we'll get to that in a second. But they do really work well together. That the fact of the matter is like, right, so she's trying to get these weapons from Brad, very specific weapons, but for him it's like, I can't make a whole shipment of them disappear and sell them without people asking questions and without me landing in jail. So that's a no-go. He's like, I can make three at a time disappear because like that's within the margin of error, but any more than that, like, people are going to start noticing. So it's like, right, how do we get those guns? Charlie's like, well, we make it so that it's a popular gun, obviously on like I guess like the more like militaristic front, but it's like, what we're going to do is we're going to make them not like basically shut down production of those, like, so they become useless, so they kind of have to toss them. So it's like, oh, we need to get rid of these guns anyway. So it's like, hey, I let Brad he's going to end up taking them, and because they're going to discontinue them, so like no one's going to miss them if they disappear. That's kind of the plan. But now they need to end up talking to the budgeting, like the person who budgets, like and like a secret. I can't remember if it was it was someone that kind of decides like the budgeting of like stuff like that. And so Daphne and Charlie ended up playing tennis with that person and her husband. And it's like, cool. Because first Daphne ended up talking to the guy who is kind of like on that front of like the gun side of things. And basically, he's okay with shifting things, but he doesn't want to take the financial risk. So they had to go to the money people to try and get them to kind of get the DOD to basically... well, he's not the Secretary of Defense. I don't think he is he? But basically get this one person from the DOD to back, like, you know, pay for it themselves so that guy has, like, that financial bubble to kind of take the hit. You know, like, he feels comfortable taking the risk because it's not his own money. It's the DOD. It's literally the government paying for it. So, but then they also had to, like, go to someone else. The guy they went to talk to later, he's a ex-CIA. I think he's former CIA as well, and that's why like he connects with Charlie later, which is so sad because Daphne knows the guy, took his course all those years ago, and he's like, oh really, yeah. Oh, hey Charlie, look at, I mean, you know, Charlie's like undercover. It's like, oh, like you've got that pendant and whatever, like, oh, you're ex-CIA, let's talk or whatever. Completely brushed Daphne off. It's like, I published a paper that even this guy said was great, but he doesn't remember me, but all he sees is your pale skin and like the little, and that's all it took for him to be like, hey, you, let me talk to you, you know? It's like, it is very, and for her, it's like, it's more disheartening because it's so obvious. It's not even like a thing of like, it wasn't subtle. It was so blatant that it just, and it's like, I should have known better. I should know that it's going to be like that, but I told myself it wasn't going to be. So, and Charlie ended up, going into that room and talking to that guy because Charlie broke this whole episode down into well, what does everyone want? Some people want money, power, and or respect. It's one of the three. That's the ultimate trifecta. Basically, you can break people down into what they want. And obviously, he'd even asked Daphne like what she wants. She's like, I want it. I figured from the very beginning, I was like, oh, she wants it all. Like, she's very ambitious like that. But he was talking to that CIA guy, and basically the guy was talking about basically it benefits them to have conflict essentially because he's like, yeah, though, like the cobalt or whatever that they need, I guess, to go into. It's like, where do you think it comes from? Like, it comes from this. I'm gonna butcher it, but basically it almost sounded like a supply and demand type of thing of like, we kind of need wars, we need conflicts to kind of feed this industry. And he was kind of talking about it with such callousness, like sounded very like warmongery to me, but so once again, it's just my own ignorance most likely. But even Charlie was kind of like, really, guy? But he had to kind of lean into it. Like, yeah, sure. Like, you can tell it severely bothered him. And it's interesting, too, because at the same time this is happening, like, obviously, while Charlie's getting close to Daphne, we saw, what was the guy named Vic, him and Emma. And obviously, they have a good enough working relationship. But Emma didn't tell him, like, right, we're supposed to let Daphne here, keep her a wide berth, but this isn't a place you're supposed to really be running operations like that. And the FBI's there to kind of make sure, especially because, well, the reason why they got onto Emma and Charlie's trail in the first place, none of this would have happened, but they got too close and their comms gave off feedback, and that's when the FBI picked it up. They wouldn't have picked it up if it wasn't for that one moment. So, obviously, Emma had to cover her trail. She had to break her comms so they wouldn't be able to scan it on her. Then she tried to rush to Charlie to get to him in time, and Vic saw her outside, and she kind of shaked her head like no, so he covered for Charlie later on when he's like, I wonder how Charlie would have found his, the bug would have been found in, the earbud, it would have been found either way. Even if Charlie had tossed it somewhere, it still would have been like, oh, someone in this room had it. So there wouldn't have been no easy way of getting rid of it type of situation. So ultimately, they walked away being able to do what Daphne wanted. And the interesting and complicated thing about it all is, for one, Daphne, this episode really makes you sympathize with Daphne. It doesn't make her a great person. She still has been but it's also, it's that interesting conundrum of yes, she's a bad guy on a worse level than Charlie, but they humanized her in this episode because she was just always kind of the antagonist, the bad guy. Whereas at least Charlie and his family have that Robin Hood thing going on, so you side with them obviously a lot more. You see them as bad guys doing bad guy things, but once again, you're ripping off criminals. It's not like you're stealing from good people or whatever. So that's, but then Daphne, you learn about her circumstances. It's her going to college, her, obviously she was close to her mom. Her mom meant a lot to her. She was she remembers her mom getting a second job, kind of as a night maid. And she remembers her mom taking her, whenever a friend of her mom's couldn't watch Daphne, she'd bring her to her second job with her, and Daphne remembers her fancy places or whatever, her mom cleaning them and stuff like that. And when she when she was in college, her mom got cancer, and she took a year off hoping that she could help, but she couldn't. And it's my mom didn't even get to see me graduate. And I couldn't even get that. I wanted to at least give that to her. I wonder, is it because that year she took off, if she hadn't, does that mean she would have graduated ahead of time and her mom could? Probably, it's that thing of, hey, I took a year off because I wanted to be there for my mom, but if I had just went ahead and kept going on with college, because I couldn't do anything for her, and no one wants to feel powerless in that situation, and in a familial situation like that, where it's hey, something's happening, and you can't really do anything about it. You kind of have to trust the medical system and everything to do its job, and even then, even when they do it, it's just it's it feels like sometimes it's the roll of the dice on whether or not they can, so it's a thing. Like I said, you got to see her be human, and obviously Charlie opened up with her and explained a little bit of his family circumstances. Like, right, they used his, what was it, like 2 generations or so of his family basically did suits for wise guys or something. And it's like, right, how, like, so his family's had ties to the criminal world in the past, and his dad became a grifter because he had an honest job. It wasn't like he was a steel worker, but he got laid off. The work dried up, and then so did his pension disappeared. So for him, it's like, right, if the people above me are gonna like steal, why shouldn't I kind of steal from them, type of thing, of just kind of like I'm not stealing from those who aren't already stealing from others, type of thing. So, and even later on, Emma, kind of because initially Emma's like, oh, did you tell that story? Was it true, or was that just to get close to Daphne? And he was like, both. But once again, I brought it up earlier, Emma didn't like do the same, even though the same was applicable in her case of like, oh, I did it for both the operation, but also because I care about you. I didn't want you to like end up in a dangerous situation. So either way, obviously Charlie's not like fully leading Daphne on, because I brought that up before, whether or not that was going to be a thing of like, hey, a situation of them getting close because of like Charlie's meant to get close to her and maybe feelings start developing, and then like Daphne like gets closer and starts feeling a certain way, and then finds out that Charlie's kind of. I'm curious, is Charlie going to? I don't think he's going to, because his family's like well-being is on the line, but I was wondering, like, do you think he could end up kind of feeling bad for Daphne and wants to try and give her an out? Probably not. It's more so because obviously I don't think he's going to develop any real feelings for Daphne, but what if, once again, because I theorized that before, like, what if that ends up being her case, and like she ends up like falling for him because she feels like she finally found an equal, someone, she even says in this episode, someone who kind of understands. Because her and Charlie are kind of in a similar spot. Like I said, like her situation, just like her crimes and stuff like that, are worse than Charlie's and stuff. But it's still a thing of life throws you curveballs, and that's what kind of led her down her criminal path. And she's good at it, and that's why she's fully embracing it, because it is a thing of, it's simply like, I don't ever want to be in a position again where I never will feel like I can't do anything. And so I found, my dad ended up finding me. I ended up getting mixed up in the business, and I'm really good at it. So once again, I want it all. I want to kind of be seen. I want to be powerful, and I want the wealth, And obviously Charlie's never wanted kind of out of the life that he is with his family. He wanted to just kind of be able to walk away. So it's a complicated thing of their circumstances when it comes to their criminal lives and stuff. But once again, Charlie made it, circling back, Charlie made it clear, like, nah, I kind of have no business, like, no interest in kind of becoming, because she's like, yeah, when this is all said and done, I'm going to need a partner. So she liked working with Charlie, and it's like, you're really good at what you do. But for him, it's like, I have no interest in that. But she does bring up the whole, yeah, but, you might want to have like a nice, comfy nest egg, because, you want to make your dad's final years, comfortable, because he opened up about his dad's dementia and everything. So, and obviously they both have a situation like, my mom had cancer, your dad has dementia, and that's got to be rough. So, which is so interesting. This is the family you were kind of putting the screws to before, and now you're getting very sympathetic towards them. But it's also because now you've gotten to know Charlie a lot more. So it seemed like that was something he was thinking about, but it's just like, right, he's not comfortable with this world of that level of criminality to like kind of be okay with that. But I think it is something probably like going to be nestled in the back of his mind about that. So obviously Emma's play at that place ended up kind of putting her and Vic kind of on opposite sides, because for him, he wasn't comfortable. He's like, right, obviously I got grilled about why we didn't find any listening devices and stuff like that. Find out who was responsible, and Emma was appreciative that he covered for her, but he's like, yeah, but whatever rapport we were building, yeah, that kind of went down the toilet this episode, because he's like, I hope that asset of yours is worth it. And she looks at Charlie and she's like, I hope so too, because it's like, because now it is that thing of like, she took her father's advice, because she'd even had that conversation with Vic where it's like, before, she's like, I thought I was drawn to this job, kind of like called out to me. I was drawn to it because I'm very good at it. And, there's certain aspects she feels like this job kind of called to her for, but it is that conversation she had with her dad where it's like, yeah, I always saw things as so black and white. And this, once again, the CIA has its history. That's also why, like Leo and Fran weren't too thrilled about working with the CIA. I think we'll see that kind of fleshed out probably even more so when, once again, the entire family kind of has to work with Emma, not just Charlie. But, which obviously, for the sake of everything, Emma's also keeping that from like her coworker and friend about, it's like, right, got to keep this asset on a need-to-know basis type of situation. But that it makes the whole situation just that much sadder, like between the Emma and Charlie thing, because it's like they're so in love with each other, but it's like their circumstances just like it's just Charlie saying I love you too kind of came at the worst time, with him kind of having to tell her everything about who he is and everything. And I think we'll obviously dive into that more going forward in the future episodes, but I am so... It's definitely just going to be interesting to see what that, like I said, that I brought up earlier, like continuing that working relationship, their new dynamic, how that looks and what that plays out like. So, but anyway, another side of this episode involved Birdie finding out about what happened between Simon and Leo. And so it turns out Leo came home one day and found Simon passed out. I don't know if that came up last episode, like his issue was like drugs. I didn't remember if that was it. I mean, we don't know if like he might have, I mean, I'm sure maybe other vices because of his addictive, like, because of his addiction, like other things, like even like alcohol could still lead him down that road. So I don't know, but it seems like drugs were mainly his thing. But it's like, right, he was passed out. Ollie was in the tub. She had been in there so long. Her lips were blue. She was freezing. He's like, I warmed her up. I put a gun to Simon's head and was like, you get out of both of their lives or I will kill you. And the entire time, Birdie never knew that. And for her, it's a frustrating thing, because it's like, I understand why you did what you did. And I love that you did that. Because yes, Ollie could have died, but I wish you had told me, because like the past 10 years she's been dealing with like, well, what did I do wrong? And that's this sad thing about when someone, like when you're abandoned, you start thinking those type of things of, well, what did I do wrong? Like, like I shouldn't be thinking that. I shouldn't, it's on them, but she still sadly took on that for the past 10 years. And sadly, Leo and Fran never really thought that she would do that, They were trying to protect her, obviously, but it's still the thing of, for her, it's like, I wish you had told me, because it would have been, I should have known. But Leo's like, I did what I know you can't do, because if I had told you the truth, you would have tried to reach out to Simon, you would have drawn him back, and you wouldn't have been able to let him go, and so I finished that then and there by deading that whole situation. And so obviously she talks to Simon, which Simon admits like what he did was wrong. It's like Ollie could have died, and at the end of the day, that's why he stayed away all this time. He's like, that's why I made sure I did not reach out until I was so. I mean, that's also, once again, addiction isn't something that is just, oh, I'm good. I've been 2 years sober. I'm good. It's like, no. Sadly, people can relapse at any point in time, because it is a lifelong situation. You're no longer a former addict. You're always an addict. You just all you can do is like one day at a time, so type of situation. All you can do is make it through the next day and the next day, and have the tools and the necessary tools and everything to make sure that you keep going. And even that's, once again, not like a foolproof thing, sadly. And even later on, Birdie's talking to Fran, and I love how Fran kind of turned it around on her being like, right, I get it, you're mad, I understand, like, I was glad when Leo told me what he did, what he did to kind of get Simon out of your lives. She's like, I was kind of actually happy, but I get it too, like, right, your dad, we should have told you, but it's like, yeah, I guess now you know what it's like, to I mean, but you would know about, keeping a secret from your daughter because you're trying to protect her. And it's like, oh, how, give me your thoughts about this. It's like, oh, what about you being like a manipulative person or whatever? She's like, no, I'm talking about my nails. I was like, obviously the parallel, because Ollie found out last episode is like, obviously Birdie had done the same thing of like, hey, I'm trying to protect my daughter from what we are. So it's like, right, can I really cast stones when I'm literally doing the same thing? And as a parent myself, I understand, because I did it to my daughter, so I understand my parents doing it to their daughter. So ultimately, Birdie's willing to give Simon a chance, because he wants to be in Ollie's life now, He wants to be there for her. And Ollie, at the end of the day, Birdie's like, it's not my choice. I think it is your choice, so you get to decide. Because she also, is being frank with him. It's like, why was he going? And it's like, because he was trying to get sober. And she's like, that must have been a really hard thing for him to... It's like, did it really take those 10 years? And she was like, yeah. And the fact is that Ollie can be so sympathetic about it. Like, oh, that must have been really rough then, And so... she's willing to take that leap. Both of her and Simon are nervous, but I also love Leo being like, all right, yeah, that, because because of like the 12 steps, he's at the step of kind of, I guess, asking for forgiveness. And so he's thanking Leo, because it's like, if it wasn't for you doing what you did, I wouldn't be here right now in a better position. So I have to thank you for it. So it's like, all right, the ice cream place you're taking, Ollie, there's a friend there. And if I see you even smoking a candy cigarette, this is done. And he's like, I completely understand. But that wasn't Leo's words. That was, and beautifully enough, Leo and Birdie, she's the one, those were her words, and he was the vessel to speak through them. And it's like showing, like, once again, her... Because I think she wants to be able to give Simon a second chance, but she also has to have that buffer that is her dad to be like, right, say what I need to objectively say, because if I don't want to, if I say it to Simon directly, that might complicate things with Ollie, might make him a little too in his own head about it. When it comes to me, like, Leo's a different situation. So she's like, I need to have that buffer zone that is my dad to say what I need to say logically in a situation, but when I'm around you, I can't say what I really should say and need to say. So my dad's going to be the one to say it. So, but also showing that, yes, they are a unit, like, because yes, I understand when you did what you did, because I've done the same thing to protect my daughter. So they're kind of on the same page again. So lots of really, really, really interesting things. I'm curious to ultimately see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.